Good morning, Year 4, and welcome to Tuesday's English lesson. Because we finished George's Marvellous Medicine last week, this week we're going to move on to a new book. But today, to start with, we're going to look at the difference between fiction and non-fiction. Can you remember which is which? These pictures on this page might give you a clue. Here are the definitions. Fiction books contain made-up stories, whereas non-fiction books contain true facts and information. Fiction books rely on your imagination to make them. They're not real stories. And they might even include crazy things, like talking animals or monsters that live in the sea. Fiction books usually have these features in them. So they're not real, they're made-up stories. They would have characters and a certain setting for where the story takes place. It might have illustrations, pictures. And quite often stories have a big problem in them and then a solution at the end. And fiction books should be read in order from beginning to end. Otherwise, they might not make sense. Examples of fiction might be fairy tales or nursery rhymes, picture storybooks, chapter books, or novels which are longer stories. Can you think of any other types of fiction texts? Remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be a book. Pause the video to have a think about it. Some examples might include songs, films, or descriptive writing. Now let's move on to non-fiction. Non-fiction texts give you information or teach you something. So quite often you'll find that they include real facts, they give you information. You might find a contents page if it's a book. You'd find that at the beginning, which tells you all the sections of the book. You might also find a glossary. Now, a glossary explains any tricky words that you might not understand from the book, so it gives you their definitions. You might also find an index, which is at the back and tends to be in alphabetical order, and you can look up words and it'll tell you what pages those things are mentioned on. You might also find headings and subheadings that tell you what each page is about. And you might find diagrams with labels, or possibly even photographs. And one of the great things about non-fiction texts is that you don't have to read them in order from beginning to end like you do with a fiction book. You can just dip in and out to find interesting information. Here are some examples of non-fiction texts. They include a lot of things that you'll be familiar with that we use at school, like dictionaries or history books, books about science. You might also have books at home about travel. If you've been on holiday somewhere and you've bought a guidebook about that area, that's a non-fiction text as well. And non-fiction isn't just books. Documentary films, like the ones that Sir David Attenborough does, those are also non-fiction. See if you can think of any other kind of non-fiction. What else gives us information? So non-fiction could include things like newspapers, posters, and leaflets as well. Right, now we have a good understanding of the difference between fiction and non-fiction. Let's see what we'd like you to do today. If you look on Google Classroom today, you'll find a document that has pictures of all of these books. What we'd like you to do is have a look at the titles and the covers and see if you can work out what types of books they are, whether they're likely to be fiction or non-fiction, and put them into two groups. Now, you can do this in different ways. If you are able to, you could print the sheets, cut out the pictures and stick them onto two pieces of paper. Or you could write down the titles of the books into two lists, or you could even draw the books if you want to onto two different lists. However you do it, you need to split them into fiction and non-fiction. The second part of your task today is to look around your own home and see if you can find lots of different books. And we'd like you to add them to your lists, your fiction and non-fiction lists. I've included a few pictures here of books that we've used in Year 4 so far. See what else you can find and add those titles to your lists. Remember, fiction means made up. Non-fiction means it's real information. Have fun looking for lots of books today. We'll see you again tomorrow.